Even like recently, CoStar making a takeover bid for domain in Australia. Interesting stuff, innovative times. And there's no better way to kick off the conference than to hand over to Malcolm Myers. Malcolm is the founder and CEO of European Internet Ventures, and he's going to talk about monetizing property portals in South, which I think is South Asia and Southeast Asia. Okay, so what the impact's going to be. So I'm looking forward to this. So thank you, Malcolm.
Well, thank you, Simon. Thank you very much. Look, it's wonderful to be back here at the PropTech and Portal Watch Asia. A lot of very familiar faces. Those who don't know me, my name is Malcolm Myers. I have spent the past 15 years in the world of classifieds and marketplaces, head of M&A at Naspers, advisor to the Scout Group for a long time, and I now run my own advisory business called EIV. What do? We do three things. We help founders raise money, but usually checks of 20 million and above. We help founders exit, so we run sell-side processes, and we do a lot of work with private equity, advising them on which businesses to buy and which ones not to. Here are just a few examples of the companies we've worked on, plenty of PropTech, but I also bring insights from other verticals as well. So today's topic, we're going to take it in three parts. First of all, the rather provocative question, does classifieds work in emerging markets? And when I say emerging markets, I'm really focusing on South Asia and Southeast Asia today. Which models are likely to win? Which kind of business models are likely to generate meaningful revenues? And finally, how might AI change that game? So let's get started. First of all, if you are the leading property portal in a large country, you're making a lot of money. So here we have 9 players who are making more than 100 million. We have 3 who are making more than 500 million in revenues. And of course, we have Zillow, which is making $1 billion in revenues. But then when we turn to this part of the world, there is no, let me be clear, advertising-based property portal, which is generating more than $100 million in revenues. You know, the best we get to is Singapore, which is a small market but very well monetized. And then we have, of course, India, a huge market but very poorly monetized, and nobody else even comes close to it. And in fact, that concept of the dominant advertising-based portal is the exception, not the rule, once you get out of Europe, US, and Australia. On this chart, you want to be either right at the top or right at the bottom, because that means if you're at the top, it means one vertical dominates, and at the bottom, it means a horizontal dominates. And most of the companies along the top line here are European, or we have just a couple of exceptions with Grupo Zap and Zameen. Most of the rest of you, and most of Southeast Asia, of course, is in the middle there. And in fact, if you think about it, there are probably 6 conditions for a dominant advertising portal, which I've created this horrific acronym, DAP, to save some typing space. But the DAP requires 6 conditions to succeed. What are they? The first of all is you need to be frequented by a large percentage of people who are in market, whether they're about to buy or they're considering buying. They all need to be coming to where you are. Secondly, your traffic has to be at least 3 times more than the number 2. It doesn't help to be a leader by 20%. You've got to be a leader by 2x, 3x, ideally 5x. Thirdly, there has to be a good stock turnover. It doesn't help if only 1 or 2% of homes change hands each year. Fourthly, you need roughly 75% of transactions to be above a certain minimum average selling price. And of course, agencies have to be active as well, because the dominant advertising portal is very much advertising reliant in terms of its revenue stream. So you've got to have proper amount of intermediation. And you need to have a structured set of agents that actually are prepared to spend money on building up their brands. So let's look very quickly at how that happens. Number 1, property portals. This chart takes the number of uniques per month of the largest property portal and divides it by the number of homes. So in the Rightmove in the UK, you have about 15 million uniques each month, and you have about 1 million properties sold each year, hence the number 15. So you can see immediately the world splits into 3 groups: high penetration, medium penetration, low penetration. And if you're one of those 4 countries to the right, my right, probably your left, my right as well, then you're going to find it harder to monetize. Secondly, traffic RMS, very important thing to have. Probably only about 3 players here really have it big time. Zameen in Rumor and 99 in Indonesia, and Property Guru here. And some of you might remember this chart from before. Basically, on this chart, you want to be, you want to be over here because it means you're monetizing more, you're getting more revenue relative to the GDP of the country you're in. So we take the portal's revenues and divide it by the GDP of the country. So out here, you always have the outlier of RIA. RIA is the outlier for virtually everything you look at here. And then up on here, you have examples of portals which are generating relatively little revenue given the incredible market share they have. So when we look at sales velocity, this is also a very interesting one, that the markets which are up here, you're getting 5, 6, 7% of homes changing hands each year. Australia, I think it's 8. So you want to be at the top of this line if you can be. If you're at the bottom of this line, then at least according to the official numbers, you only a few percent of the housing stock are changing hands each year. And again, a big caveat for everything I'm going to say here, the numbers are hard to find in a reliable way. So I'm sure I can predict that other people will have other numbers today, but this is what I've got based upon looking at a lot of portals and accessing public data. The fourth criteria, again, for the success of the DAP model is the average selling prices. You can simply hear Singapore, good place, very high average selling prices. Most of the other markets, the average selling price is only around 100K, and often it's a little bit below that. So again, why is that important? It means that the commission which brokers are getting, which they can then invest in your portal, are quite low. Then we look at, finally, fifthly, we look at agency intermediation. We can see here, again, up here we have high intermediation, which means agents get most of the action in primary and secondary, which means that agents will be able to spend more money on your portal. And if we go down here, agents are less involved in intermediation. The blue ones are primary and the gold ones are secondary. And they're less involved in intermediating deals. They're not going to have so much money to spend on your portal. And finally, this is just one measure of how prominently agents are actually advertising in directories on portals. So if we sum it all up, what does it say? It says that the DAP model works incredibly well in Singapore, could potentially work in Malaysia, but my belief is that in any of those other 5 markets, you're going to have a different way of monetizing if you want to make a proper amount of money. And you can see that even more clearly here, where we simply divide the revenues of the number 1 portal by the total number of homes sold in the whole country. So again, Australia, the outlier, $1,500 a shot. UK goes down to around 500. And then you can see in the region, apart from Singapore, everything is way down there in the sort of 50 or lower dollars per home. So therefore, in those markets, the DAP model is not really working. So let's look at what else we could do. So the first thing we can do is we can think about ways of enhancing the DAP strategy. So we can either merge or acquire to improve that traffic relative market share. We can also try to monetize agencies differently. If they don't have cash flow to pay for subscriptions, maybe they can pay per click or pay per lead or pay per action. We can also try and get better at working with those developers who we know are a very important part of total construction, and part of total sales each year. And fourthly, we can also look at fintech and other activities. Those are the DAP strategies, or we can try and do something a little bit different, which I call the non-DAP strategy. You can either sell new units for developers, you can facilitate agency transactions, or possibly even work with vendors themselves. So option number one, M&A. Well, a lot of you in this room have done quite a lot of it. If we look up here, we can look at Pakistan, we can look at Indonesia, and of course Malaysia, where we've had multiple players coming together to increase market share. To the right of the line, it's more like there's probably a need for some M&A. There are a lot of players in Thailand. There are a very large number of players in India. And clearly one of the best ways to improve monetization and probably the overall customer experience is through merging. Secondly, a lot of these markets just aren't very big. So the secondary commissions pot isn't very big. The way I've looked at it is if you look at the number of units being sold, the average selling price which they're being sold at, and then you multiply it by the brokerage commissions, the total money which is available to spend on marketing, which not just on one portal, but marketing, which is assumed to be roughly 15% of that pot, in all markets except from Singapore, is well under $100 million. So although it might make sense to think about charging our agents per click or per lead, if the overall pot which they have to pay you with is this small, whatever the model is, it's not going to get you to the big bucks. Third option is to think about working with developers more. Here, the blue line, the blue line is showing what percentage of total sales in a year of units are new as opposed to resell. So, example would be India, where we have roughly more than half of units which are, at least in the visible markets, are primary. So developers are important. Most of you in the room have tried to market to developers. It's not as easy as you might think. One, because developers think they have something very physical to sell, so they actually think that their development itself is one of the best advertisements for what they have. They also like to use social networks very much. They are not necessarily the world's most educated people when it comes to, at least some are not, in terms of the difference between the volume of leads and the value of leads. And many developers are one project developers, right? So you don't have that learning curve with them, so you have to re-educate them every time. So although you can't miss it, it's not the easiest way you can think of to make money. Finally, fintech. Can we fix our DAP model with fintech? Well, a lot have tried and a lot have said a lot about it. Just try to spot the gray bar here, or the gray slice. So you can't see it at all in Rightmove. They just make a few million. I think it's about 10 million on financial services. Zillow makes a bit more. It's about $70 or $80 million. They bought a brokerage. They've invested a ton of money into it. It's really difficult to generate revenues from financial services if you're operating an advertising model, because you're not actually close to the buyer when they're about to buy it. When they're about to buy it, they've probably finished working on the portal, and they're now off portal working more closely with agencies. So that's a really tough one. I think if you want to look at a great way of having a high attachment rate, you have to look into the car industry, where platforms like Carvana have managed to get about 80% of sales funded. So let's then turn from the DAP options to what I call the non-DAP options, so where you don't have to be a dominant advertising portal in order to succeed. And there are three there again. So obviously new development focus, the one where we do commission-based sales with developers. And Zameen and Square Yards would be the two main players there. Secondly, we have commission sharing on secondary, where instead of selling primary, you're co-brokering with brokers. And the third model would be the no-broker model, where the portal is helping individuals to sell instead. All three of these models, to be profitable, to have decent unit economics, need for the portal to generate high traffic. If you don't have traffic, then you're no better off than an ordinary agent. You've got to have, which means you have to have high direct and high SEO traffic. You've got to have You've got to have exclusive inventory. You don't want to be in the business of trying to argue that it was your lead that did the sale and not somebody else's. And you need a ton of tech, because whenever you're selling something, there's a ton of admin, and if you don't have a lot of tech, you're going to get really hurt. If you can do all those things, then you have a very reasonable way of building up a business without having to be the dominant portal. So those are a few thoughts on models in the region. I think one example of where it's working, which isn't in the region, is in Africa, North Africa and Morocco. MubaWeb, for example, does roughly a 50-50 split. Half of its revenues are from subscriptions, and those in turn are roughly half from agencies and half from developers. And then the other half of their revenues are coming from transactions. So that's some thoughts on those things. And this is a market where you have about 250,000 transactions a year, half of which are new and half of which are secondary. So those are a few thoughts on the landscape here in Southeast Asia and South Asia. I now want to move on to how AI might be changing the game. Last time, I showed some bars about the amount of search traffic that's coming to these portals. The little white lines, the white numbers show the change since I was here last time. So no one, except a small example, I think in Germany, where there's technical issues due to interest rates, but everywhere else, no one's getting more traffic this year than last year from SEO. Now, there's going to be a lot of talk about agentic search, And I, of course, have been playing around as well. I've also been using deep research on ChatGPT. And I've been looking to find a two-bedroom condominium in Singapore, in the central CBD, Central Business District, in a couple of months' time, 2 beds, great view, very important for me, $10,000 per month rent. And what I like is that the way that the agent, the AI agent, is asking me to clarify a lot of things, right? So how big does it have to be, furnished or unfurnished? Do you need any particular amenities? I also like the fact that it's sort of it's giving me some live thinking about some ideas. And I also like the fact that there are 27 sources being used to help me out here. But then when we look at what she comes up, these are the top 4 recommendations. For the great view, I'm not sure they've got this one right. The second result is a little bit better. The view is there. I'm not sure that it's very nicely furnished. And then you go on from that. And the third result is basically a connection to some pre-chosen properties on SRX, which is the number 2 site in Singapore. So my issues here are, I'm not really getting the choice of the crop here. I'm simply getting some items, some properties which may or may not fit my criteria, but I don't have this sense that everything really has happened to make me feel that I've got the best properties available in the market. When we look at where we are, this is an adoption curve by A16Z, so the US venture capital company made a huge amount of investments in AI. Their views that were obviously very early on in the process. The moment intelligent AI agents are being used for very simple tasks like automating your McDonald's order in a drive-through, high volume recruitment, back office functions. But we're also beginning to get to much more advanced applications in terms of high-skilled interviews and so on. So we are at a very, very early stage in this process. We can imagine that within a few years, things will be dramatically different. One of the predictions is that all B2B, there won't be B2B phone calls anymore. It'll be your agent talking to my agent. So what does this mean? How might agentic search actually beat the traditional advertising-dominated or dominant advertising experience? They have 4 strengths, okay? The first strength is they are highly intuitive, which means that you can talk to your AI agent in a way that you would talk to a friend or to a physical broker. They're comprehensive in the sense that, at least in theory, they're reaching out to far, far more than just the listings of agencies who happen to subscribe to your portal. Thirdly, they're good at inferring, they're understanding, they're looking at the photographs, they're trying to work out where are the views, south-facing, north-facing, proximity to schools and so on. And fourthly, they're also personalized because clearly, you can interact, you can state preferences, and those searches get more and more refined to your needs. So those are the good things. On the weaknesses, first obvious point is moderation. Remember, in the early days of portals, we got a ton of rogue content on property portals, and eventually portals got much better at filtering that out. Well, guess where all those blacklisted agents are going to be found? They're going to crop up when those intelligent agents start looking for attractive-looking properties. Secondly, the sense of thoroughness is clearly not there yet. If you're running a search on Singapore and you're not including index content from Property Guru, then you're clearly not actually being very thorough, despite that there are many, many more sources being used. Thirdly, I think that actually what comes out is very text-based. When you look at the results summary which you get from these searches, a lot of it's just black and white text, which reminded me of classifieds, Craigslist sort of stuff. Of course, it's going to get much better, more engaging, but at the moment, it's not there yet. And also, I personally found when I did get those results, it was much harder to try and sort and filter than it would be on a portal. But again, these are very, very early days. Second thought is, how will agentic search actually monetize? It can't be free forever, right? Because every compute costs money. But can it be ad-based? Because if it were ad-based, whether we're talking about sponsored ads or price per click, per lead, per action, it's the same problem every time, right? Then your agent is going to prioritize the properties which they're getting the most money on, not the properties which necessarily most accurately fit your match. So I think we are a long way from having worked out what is the right business model for, let's call them neutral, independent agentic search platforms to take over the property search. There are, of course, AI agents will impact the property discovery and transaction ecosystem, and from many, many different angles. The little chart, the little picture here is simply a lot of B2B AI agents in the B2B space. It's not specifically for real estate, but clearly there are already a lot of agents which are specialized, for example, in sales and support, for financial services, and clearly the same technologies, the same capabilities can be reconfigured to be working very well in the real estate space. So my first example was about a standalone AI agent. In that case, it was using ChatGPT Deep Search. But of course, everyone can start adopting AI agents into their workflows and processes. Portals can do it, real estate agencies can do it, and individual buyers and sellers can do it. And let's have a quick look at what that might mean. So for portals, of course, portals can also, the agentic advantage we talked about can also become the advantage of the portal. So portals can also be highly intuitive, in theory, and make those interfaces, when you're saying what you want, be as intuitive as using the AI agent. This is an example from ImmoScout free text search. Today, free text searches work best when you're actually asking for things which are in the filters anyway, like 3 bedrooms, garden, but of course will get much better. Secondly, becoming comprehensive. Now, this is more controversial. So the third-party agentic search is very comprehensive, but why couldn't Rightmove be more comprehensive, or Property Guru? Why couldn't Property Guru also factor in listings from individuals or from agents that aren't on their portal? The only challenge is what will be the monetization model so that you don't cannibalize your subscription stream. Thirdly, the third advantage we talked about was learning inference. Clearly, you can also, as a portal, put in the technology which also infers from the content you have. And the advantage you have is you've got 10 or 20 years worth of photographs and descriptions which can help to make that inferencing work much, much better. One example is in Italy where Immobiliare has already integrated ChatGPT into the core of its search. Personalization, again, we like the way that the independent agent, AI agent, was very personalized. It knew me, I could talk to it more and more. Well, it's the same idea. You could, of course, as a portal, become much more personalized in the recommendations you make for individuals. And again, you have a ton of data which you can use to do that with. And so as a portal, you can do a lot. But one reason why you should do a lot is because if you don't do a lot, there are real estate agents who are also going to be playing with the same tools. So here I've split some of the AI applications which are around today on the content creation side and on the buyer engagement side. So we've got specialist AI-based applications, for example, for photo enhancement, virtual staging. I know one of the sponsors here is also involved in doing that. Generating floor plans, writing listings, right, making those descriptions sound really great. Image tagging, inferring from photographs more insights. Companies like Resby, again, I think, sponsored these in the past. Content evaluations, SEO writer. And then on the right-hand side, buyer engagement. There's an application called Potion, which actually creates video avatars of an agent. So you're going to get a video call with your agent's avatar in it, which is going to update you on the property. It's going to be automated. It's going to follow up with you at specific moments. This is going to become huge. You also have CRM apps like Lone Wolf, which are going to help agents to decide which leads to prioritize and which ones not to. Again, personalizing those campaigns, much stronger social media marketing and so on. And one other example, you have apps like Roof and Elise for call answering and lead enhancement. And if you don't find the apps, if an agent doesn't find the apps which they need from that list, then they can always use gptbots.ai to configure their own specialist app for whatever part of their agency process they need. And then the final thought is, we've talked about real estate portals, we've talked about real estate agencies. Of course, there's vendors as well, because there's no reason why a vendor can't make use of AI-based technologies to actually sell on their own. So there are already some apps today. There's Houselaw in the US, there's also Mogul here, which are trying to help you as an individual sell your home by, for example, giving you, in the US, this is an example of giving access to MLS, valuations and so on. And then on the buyer side, we have, for example, we have Joy.ai, which is helping you as a buyer have the confidence to understand whether it's a good deal and to help you simplify the process of acquisition. So that's it from me. That dominant advertising portal strategy, in my view, if you have one, well done. I think as long as you adapt, it'll stay like a very good business for a long time. But if you don't already have one in these markets, then I think you're going to have to look at some of these other revenue streams in order to scale profitably. AI is obviously both a huge opportunity for portals, but it's also a great threat if you don't adapt, because you'll find that agencies and individuals may also change the way they buy property. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
As always, a fantastic start to the conference. Aha, we have, the questions are coming up. I think we'll read them here.
Yeah.
Way too hard. How can we leverage AI for dynamic pricing?
Why would you want to, what do you want to price dynamically would be my first question. Do we want to dynamically price houses? Or do we want to dynamically price the cost of listing and advertising? So
I don't know, I didn't write the question.
I know
However, I would assume this is
Akrazi.
around dynamic pricing of an advertising model. So how would they, was it about leveraging the data that's collected by the organization and then dynamically pricing to advertise a housing or a house or to upgrade it on a website?
I mean, the main inputs for pricing will be based upon demand and supply, and the more information which you're able to process, the better you can get at it. I'm not sure that AI is a game changer compared to where you are today, but simply it's the capacity to use more information in order to make those decisions more accurate.
Okay. Humans are inherently lazy. Okay. In your opinion, is typing a detailed prompt easier than selecting filters?
I suspect filter selection is a habit which will die quite quickly. It's just that we've just been trained to do it for 20 years. But I think, typing, by the way, is probably the wrong verb, right? Because I think we expect interfaces to become much more vocal, right? So voices. It'll be more like talking to a friend, right? Oh yeah, could you make sure that the home has also got at least 3 bedrooms and that it's not more than a 10-minute walk away from the closest shops.
Okay. I saw, actually, in that category, I think it's an interesting perspective. I saw a demonstration, I can't say from which company, the other day, where it had a person literally talking at the computer to the property portal. So they were actually, it was just a conversation between a portal and the searcher. And the portal kept coming back to the individual saying, oh, now how are you thinking about this? Are you interested in this and this? And was using as a conversational approach, search, which is interesting. So it's gone from filtered-based searching to text-based searching, where we now free-form and we can start to ask questions and it goes off and search, to now it becomes a conversation.
And conversation is a very pleasant way to interact, but the filter gives that sense of thoroughness, which a conversation, to me at least, doesn't yet.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I also think it's about brand as well. So if you're Rightmove, there's built with the brand is thoroughness.
Yeah.
So, and I think what will happen over time is that how your brand is perceived in the market will equate to how people will utilize the product.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay. We used to hear a lot about Zameen, however, we don't hear much about them anymore. What's changed?
I'm the wrong person to ask. Look, I still think that the model was brilliant, right, to work with developers where developers are doing most of the business. I think that one issue is cash flow, right? That if you're in a commission-based model, there's often a gap of 1 to 2 years between when a property is marketed and when the commission is actually paid, because the commission is paid usually only upon completion and moving in. Pakistan also has macro issues, right? But I still believe that the model is right, and I think it'll work out.
Yeah, we had Imran at the Barcelona
Yep.
conference and presenting, and he said one of the challenges they've got is just the major macroeconomic conditions. You can no longer actually transfer money out of the country. That makes it a problem for shareholders who are outside, especially given Dubizzle Group is based out of Dubai, so they can't get money out of it.
Yep.
Plus, you can't get, people don't want to, a lot of the money going into Pakistan was from the diaspora
Yep.
investing back in. That's sort of gone to zero. Because of all this, there's not enough money in demand for houses, which means the whole market has ground to a halt. Plus, I think he said there was a 20% tax on new property purchases.
Not very helpful.
Right, so a whole bunch of this stuff collapses the market, and if that was one of your main assets historically, they made a very good choice at moving to Dubai about 10 years ago.
True.
And focusing on that market. Last question, the million-dollar question, okay? What do you mean for long when you say it will take a long time for agentic search to beat advertising model?
So I'm not sure, at least I didn't intend to create a dichotomy between either agentic search or advertising model. And I think that the dApps will try and feel more and more like they're also generating an agentic search experience. The other point I was making was getting the right monetization model if you're a standalone agentic search app. I think that's much more difficult. How exactly do you get paid?
Okay, one last question, slightly controversial. If you had been Rightmove, sorry, I'm going to reverse the question, right, from last night.
Yep.
If you had been Rightmove, would have you taken the offer? I
would have, yes.
Okay, I think so too. I would have taken
But
the money.
that doesn't mean to say that they don't have a great future, but there's probably just a bit more risk attached to the outcome now than there has been in the past.
Yeah, and it's put expectations on management to deliver growth that outside of pricing increase,
yeah,
they're going to have to do something new, and one will have to question whether they've got the DNA to do that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, fantastic, Malcolm. Thank you for your thoughts, and as always, thanks again.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay.